How y'all doing?
Hi guys, Happy New Year. I know it's been a while. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, I'm Samira. I'm so happy to have you here. I know it's been a while since I've last posted something, but you know, it's a new year, new me, new reading year. I do have a Bookstagram and a Twitter, which I'm more active on Twitter than I am on here and Bookstagram, but I am active on Instagram stories. So if you want to see more from me, be sure to follow me on there because I yell about a lot of fictional characters that I love dearly. Last year was actually like the most successful reading year I've ever had. I think I read around like 57 books last year, which 57 for me. I think the highest I've ever gone was like 40 something, usually averaging around like 35-ish books, and my book goal for last year was actually 35. So I told Goodreads, I was like, you want to see some real speed? I'll show you some real speed. And I didn't think I was going to have a good reading year last year because I started the year off with a really bad reading slump. I didn't read anything for I think the first 4 months out of that year, and somehow I ended up reading the most I've ever read. So I'm not complaining. Don't ask me how I got there. Actually, JK. I listened to a lot of audiobooks that helped my reading goal. A trend I realized last year was that there were so many books that ended up being favorites, and they were like surprises in that I knew I would enjoy it, but not as much as I ended up actually enjoying it. So that was great. Considering last year was like a way better reading year than I thought it would be for me, I just thought I'd come on here and tell you guys like what my top reads of 2020 were. I discovered a lot of new favorites last year and I can't wait to share. I'm gonna do it as like the top 10 books I read last year, but like they're not really in any particular order because obviously they're favorites, so like I would like all of them for different reasons. But I would say the top 3 are very much well deserved, so you will wait and see. So number 10 was Renegades by Marissa Meyer. I read the Lunar Chronicles by her when I first started getting back into reading books and like starting back with books, and I was in the minority on this one. I didn't really like the Lunar Chronicles. I know a lot of people are gonna hate me for this, but I just thought the writing was so basic. Yeah, I don't know how else to describe it, but I liked it, but not enough to continue it. I think I read until like Cress, and I just thought that her writing was very basic at the time, or at least it was just those books. A friend recommended Renegades to me, and I don't know if you guys know this, I love Marvel. I love anything superhero related. So this was sold to me as like Marvel but YA. I said, okay, I'll give this a try. So I read or listened to the entire trilogy over the summertime, and I ended up enjoying it so much more than I thought I would. It was one of those series where, you know, you feel like you like it after you read it, but you can't stop thinking about it for like days after you finish reading it. So that's how, in my head, that's how I know it's a really good series or a good book in general. And Renegades was just that for me. I really enjoyed it. If you are like me and you like anything that's like superhero related, like anything with like superpowers, this is the book for you. I highly recommend it. The characters, I loved every single one. So my requirements for a favorite or like a book that I know I'm gonna enjoy is great world building, solid plot line, and characters that I love. Bonus points if I love and care for like every single character, including the side characters. That for me is a sign that it's a book I will love, because usually like I'd only care for certain characters and I don't really care for the side characters as much, and sometimes the plot line can get very convoluted, especially when it comes to fantasies. But this one was so good, like it invested in me from like the first chapter that I listened to. The characters, I loved every single one of them, and I think I gave all of them 5 stars because I gave it 5 stars for different reasons. So the first one was very much plot oriented. Did a really great job of like sucking you into the world and getting you invested, which is great for like a first book in a series. The sequel was 5 stars for me because character development. That's another, add that to the list. Character development is like key for me to love a book. And character development, that was exactly what the sequel was. It was so good. The third one was just everything combined. It was really great. And then the ending, I'm convinced there has to be a spin-off. Marissa Meyer, there better be a spin-off for Renegades, because I'm gonna be very upset. Highly recommend if you really want to read it. That was one of the books that really surprised me. Number 9, I put Chain of Gold. The Shadowhunters series were the ones, like the first series I ever read in YA. And I've been invested ever since I first read Mortal Instruments, which now, after reading Dark Artifices, Infernal Devices, and now with the Final Hours trilogy, Mortal Instruments just took a nosedive for me. And like, I am happy to say that Cassandra Clare's writing has gotten so much better over the years. Of course, naturally, Chain of Gold was like an instant read for me, and somehow, don't ask me how, somehow I didn't know, I was the last person to find out that the main character in Chain of Gold is of Persian descent. Clown Central, because I was like, hello, how did I not know this? So naturally, I ended up loving it so much. This was more so of a very sentimental and personal favorite for me, because Persian representation, especially in YA, is like a unicorn. Not very well represented in the YA community, but I'm glad that like over the years it has more of a prevalence now. So especially, but this was very interesting to me, or like very intriguing, because Cassandra Clare is a very prominent writer, at least in the YA community, and the fact that her main character is of Persian descent was just mind-blowing to me. And so I instantly love Cordelia. Cordelia is the one that's of Persian descent. I love Cordelia. Naturally, I'm fan casting myself as her. Like, I had red hair in the past, Cassie. If you were trying to cast people, please hire me, and like, you don't have to worry about the Persian being butchered, because I can actually speak Farsi. So, and that was another thing I loved about it, was the fact that there's so much Farsi. There's so much Farsi in that book, and it's like a little treat, little Easter egg, because if you don't know Farsi, you wouldn't understand the references and like understand the Farsi throughout the book. And so I would be like texting my friends who were reading it at the same time, be like, oh my gosh, this is what this means. So I'm planning on rereading it before Chain of Iron comes out in March, and just be a ball of emotions again over James and Cordelia. And I cannot wait for the sequel to come out March 2nd. I am coming after you, Chain of Iron. But yes, I loved it so much. I can't wait for Chain of Iron. And when I reread Chain of Gold, I was planning on making like this Farsi guide pronunciation, like meaning, because it adds so much angst to the already angsty like romance we get in Chain of Gold. So look out for that. Keep me accountable. I want to do that when I reread. So yes, so that way it can be like a guide for you as well if you're gonna reread before Chain of Iron comes out. So next up we have Frankly in Love by David Yoon. This was another book that I was not expecting to enjoy as much as I did, because I like romances, and this was sold to me as like a YA romance, but it's so much more than a YA romance. Like, romance, I don't know why people are selling it as that, because romance is not the forefront feature of the book whatsoever. Like, I'd say it's such a great coming of age story, and it follows like the nuances when you're living inside of a Asian household, family dynamics in an Asian household, and like the expectations that come with it, and just like how they view mental health, how they view mixed relationships. Like, I loved it so much, and it was so much deeper than I expected from a YA book, but that's why I ended up enjoying it so much, because it had so much substance in a very easy to grasp form in a YA book, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it so much, more than I thought I would. And that's why this is on this list. Again, I couldn't stop thinking about it when I finished reading it. I was tearing up at work when I was listening to this. And yeah, I just highly recommend it. If you're looking for a YA book that is more than just a YA book, highly recommend. Number 7 on this list, we have Becoming by Michelle Obama. I love this book so much. This book made me feel many things, and at the end I just wanted her to give me a big hug. I don't tend to read nonfiction books like ever at all. It's just when I read, it's for escapism purposes, and I don't want to read about real life stuff because that's what I'm trying to escape from. I didn't really intend on reading this, but I read so many good reviews about this book, and she's someone that I look up to as well. And also I heard that she narrates the audiobook, so I was like, naturally I have to listen to it because it's like Michelle Obama's like reading a bedtime story to me, so why not? And I ended up enjoying it so much more than I expected. Again, trend of 2020 was finding favorites that I wasn't even expecting to like in the first place. It starts with like her childhood and like her growing up into her adulthood, into her meeting President Barack Obama and their time at the White House and afterwards. And it was just a very full circle. And I think listening to her tell her story when she already did it in book form, like just listening to her say it, like added another layer to an already very emotional and personal story. And I just loved how she talked about how her childhood growing up was living in Chicago, being from a very low income family, and like learning about like how close she was to her family, like how much family means to her, how it was to be a Black woman trying to become a lawyer and just making a name for herself, being able to come into your own without depending on anyone else. And it was interesting to hear from her point of view because she also talks about like how it was growing up as a Black woman, being able to hear experiences that she had that I otherwise would not have related to because I would obviously have a different outlook on it. So it was nice to see someone else's perspective and being able to be more understanding of their situation and what they might be going through on a daily basis that I wouldn't, even though I am a woman of color. Everyone else's experiences are completely different, so it was really nice to be able to widen my horizons and be able to look into someone else's point of view, walk of life. What can I say? Yes, I loved it. Number 6, we have Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. So last year, I also started trying to get through my physical TBR. I was very proud of myself. I didn't buy a lot of books last year. I was trying to focus on borrowing more from the library, listening to audiobooks, and consume the ones I already do have. And so Enchantment of Ravens was one of those books that's been on my shelf since release date. And I don't know what it was. I knew I would like it if I gave it a fair chance, and I never really was in the mood to read it. And so finally I was like, okay, it's not that long. Let me just read it and see how I like it. I ended up loving it. I would say that this is like the PG-13 love child of Cruel Prince and Howl's Moving Castle. That's the only valid description I can think of, and like I feel like that's a very accurate description as well. And it's a very short book as well. A physical book is only 300 pages and it's a standalone fantasy. So standalones, they tend to be very iffy to me because I get very attached to fantasy worlds in that I tend to like series more than just a standalone. But I wanted to see how she would do, and like honestly, the length did so well for this because I also read her other book, Sorcery of Thorns, and I liked Enchantment of Ravens a lot better than Sorcery of Thorns because Sorcery of Thorns was a lot longer when it didn't necessarily need to be as long. Enchantment of Ravens, even though it wasn't as long as other typical fantasies, I feel like it packed a great punch, the length that it did have. And I like it better when authors are very efficient in their writing and just get straight to the point. I do not like when authors try to drag stuff on for no reason whatsoever. And I just feel like there was not a dull moment in Enchantment of Ravens. If you're looking for something that's super fast-paced, great characters, great world building, great plot line, like this is the one for you. I highly recommend. It was so good. Probably one of my favorites now. I know she's working on something else, so I'm hoping that she comes out with it soon because I need more content from her. Number 5, we have a book that was very much hyped up to me, and I have a phobia of hyped books because I'm so scared that it's not going to live up to the expectations I have for it. And this book actually did live up to the hype for me, and that was Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Yet again, another surprise that I didn't expect to like, because I don't really read historical fiction novels just because I haven't found one that I actually really enjoy. And this one changed it for me because it was so invested. The tea was piping the entire time, and like you're just following her as she's like being interviewed about her life as a prominent actress of Cuban descent in a very much whitewashed Hollywood at the time. And I just loved it so much. Characters, every single character I loved. I teared up at the end, which is a mark of a great book for me, that I'm emotionally invested in the story and the characters, and it was told so well. And I listened to it as an audiobook. Although I own it physically, I listened to it as an audiobook, and that was just amazing. It was so good, and I would definitely say it lived up to the hype, and I highly recommend if you haven't read it yet. So number 4 comes a book, the very last book, may I add, that I read last year, and I was not expecting to like it as much as I did. I ended up loving it. I inhaled this book so fast. Like, I finished it. I don't know how long it took me, but I inhaled that book because I was recovering from burning gone. I just needed something with no things, or like didn't require as much things, and it was so good. So this book is From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I have read one book of hers before, but none of her fantasy books, and so I'd been seeing this floating around, and actually Mariam from Mariam Reads Sometimes, I'll tag her below, she actually was raving about it. I said, ooh, hello ma'am, do you think I will like this book? And she was like, yes. So of course I trust her, and so I ended up reading it, and now her trust was not misplaced because it was so good. Like, from the first page, I was invested. The main characters, I love Poppy. Poppy is like the golden standard. She's the blueprint of a heroine protagonist that you want to see as, like, just in general you want to see, but also as like a very positive role model, even for me. And she was supposed to be like, I think, a few years younger than me. I was like, I want to be her in every aspect of my life. And I love the fact that she stood her ground the entire time, and she can kick ass without needing a man, and I love that. And Hawk, who's the main male character, I love him so much. He is now on my book boyfriend list that is still growing. He's up there with Julian Blackthorne for me. Like, he is up there, and it was so good. Basically, this is a world with like vampire werewolf situation, and I am one of the very few that never really read Twilight when it came out, and I think that this was what Twilight wanted to be. And here's my hot take: this series is what A Court of Thorns and Roses wanted to be. I have said it. I feel 10 times lighter now that I have said it. But yes, this series was everything I wanted A Court of Thorns and Roses to be. At the time, ACOTAR was it. It was a golden standard, but something deep down was missing for me. There was nothing to compare it to at the time until this book. This book came in, did a mic drop for me last year, and I was like, yes, I can rest easy now, because this is like now one of my favorite series. I inhaled this book and the sequel within a week, and I loved it so much. I was squealing and screaming and just theorizing the entire time. My brain cells were like hyperactive the whole time. They were living for it. And I loved it so much, and I can't wait for the 3rd book to come out. The 3rd book needs to come out soon. And yeah, I loved it. I don't know if you can tell, but I loved it. So now, for my top 3 of 2020, which was very much well-deserved, and I had to save the top 3 for this because every single book in that trilogy deserves to be as top 3. And that trilogy is the Poppy War trilogy by R.F. Kuang. If you follow me on Goodreads, I did not like Poppy War when I first started it. I will admit to that. I did not like it. And I honestly think it's because I listened to it as an audiobook when I first read it. And this is not a book you want to listen to via audiobook because so much is happening and so many nuances are happening that you don't pick up on when you're listening to it. And especially if you're like me and you listen on like 1.5 speed. But I gave it another try because a lot of my friends loved this series and they had finished the sequel, which was the most recent one to come out. And the third book was coming out in November. So I said, okay, if everyone I know loves this book so much, there has to be a reason for why. So I reread the book and loved it the second time around because, like I said, I could see the nuances I missed out on when I was listening to the book. And it's just so cleverly written. Like, just her brain power when writing this book was just on another level. It was chef's kiss, like everything. Like I said, it has everything. It has characters that you love, especially characters you love to hate. It has amazing world building, plot line, 1,000 out of 10. The stress is also 1,000 out of 10, but it's worth it. I also appreciate the fact that I'm not going to spoil this trilogy for you because that would ruin it, obviously, but she treated this so well. And if you're like me, craving for a series that does a morally gray character right, read this series. It's so good. And I'm not going to spoil the ending, but the ending was equally brutal yet justified, and that's all I could ever ask for this series. So yes, highly recommend. Please read it. It was so good to the point that I ended up snagging the Illumicrate because I knew, you know, when you read a series and you just know it's gonna be a favorite, that's how this series was, at least when I reread it. And I said, okay, actually, let me go get it. They're as big as my head, but yes, they are thick. And look at them, they're so pretty. But yes, these are heavy with knowledge and pain and emotional roller coasters. But I highly recommend. If you were to listen to one of my recommendations, please read the series. It's so good. All of them are out now. The last book just came out in November, and yeah, I highly recommend. This is like Asian Game of Thrones, if I were to compare it to something, and that's watering it down very much. Also, if you read this series, I am the president of the Yin Ninja Protection Squad, so you can fight me on that, but yes, I stand by that. Yeah, those were my favorite books of 2020, or at least top 10 books of 2020. It's safe to say that I came out of 2020 with not only memory of a goldfish because trauma, but also new favorites that I read last year. And if you read any of these books, please let me know, or if you're planning on reading any of these books, and also what your favorite books of 2020 were, because I need some recommendations for this year. So, but yes, I hope you enjoyed. Hope to see you next time.